Did J.D. Vance just secure the 2024 election with his debate performance? Find out today as we discuss some of his pivotal moments. You won't want to miss it. I'm Drenda, and this is Drenda On Guard. Let's get into it. As you know, this past Tuesday evening, J.D. Vance and Tim Walz participated in the vice presidential debate. There were many notable moments, so we made a compilation of a few of them. But first, if you enjoy the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss an upload. And be sure to like the video and comment below with your thoughts about the debate. Who did you think won this, and what did you think about it? Without further ado, let's take a look at the first video.
The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala Harris has been, and it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You have got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable, but it becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it. And it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status. Right. Temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own
leadership. Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The CBP One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process.
It is true that they were trying to fact check J.D. Vance, and they were not telling the whole truth about these Haitian migrants. I'm an Ohioan. We know what's going on here. And it is true. With a stroke of a pen, Kamala Harris brought in these Haitian immigrants in a huge number into Springfield. You cannot overwhelm a community without some consequences to the schools, to crime, to housing. These are not legal in the sense that this is not the process they should go through for citizenship, but they made them, quote, legal. And this is the danger. We've seen this going on. We saw it during the Obama administration. We've seen it where they bring in a large amount of immigration into an area, and these people, many of them, most of them have come across the border illegally, and they're in our country illegally. And so now they're trying to, with a stroke of a pen, make them, quote, legal because they're seeking asylum. And many people have reported, ICE officers, different people have reported that these are not men coming over with their families and children primarily. They're coming across, fighting age men by themselves without kids. We've seen we've just seen crime go through the roof. We've seen housing when a community doesn't have enough resources, the schools don't have enough resources, and we've seen illegal immigrants getting benefits that American citizens don't get and taking jobs from American citizens, and those that have paid a price and paid their taxes and paid their dues, including our veterans. And so JD was great to bring this out. CBS did better than I think some of the other networks have done in the past. However, this is a point where they definitely fact-checked JD, and I think JD was perfectly in the right to explain that it was Kamala Harris that made these people, quote, legal immigrants at the stroke of a pen. They didn't go through the process that so many have gone through to actually earn and gain their citizenship through a vetting process. And these laws they're talking about, now they're concerned about the border because it's election time. But we've seen their lack of concern in that she didn't go to the border all this time. And so I have to stand with JD on this conversation that he's absolutely in the right. And this has overwhelmed Springfield, but not only Springfield, it's been in the limelight, but all over the nation. We have seen even mayors of cities like New York City turn against the Democrat Party because of what they've done with illegal immigration. They've not enforced our laws. They've not vetted people properly at the border, and they have split up families in doing so and created really a national emergency, a national disaster. And who knows what's coming next, as many of these folks have set up, encamped all over the nation, and how this will play out in future days as they stir up strife between the Muslim community and Iran and the U.S., and how this will be used. Will Iran and Iranians and those that have come here as Muslims be used as a proxy against citizens and against even Donald Trump, as in what we've seen with the recent missiles being smuggled in, put back together, and we were told being targeted at Trump's jet. We'll see. Let's take a look now at the energy policies and the debate about solar panels and energy.
Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax, and then joked that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in. What we've seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments, the biggest in global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, has created jobs all across the country. 2,000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking the EV technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have. We're also producing more clean energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward, that climate change is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes sense. And then we start thinking about how do we mitigate these disasters.
Thank you. Senator, I want to give you an opportunity to respond there. The governor mentioned that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here. And I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years.
Senator.
Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing
Senator,
worse by the climate.
Senator, your time is up.
So, first of all, I want to just comment earlier, Tim Walz said that I don't talk about my faith very often. And this is a situation where I'll talk to him about his faith, okay? We see in the Bible, it says, as long as the earth remains, there will be seed time and harvest time, day and night. And so the Bible is very clear, there are resources and energy. And when we trust in God and we believe that, climate emergency begins to become the sky is falling. You've heard me talk about it before, but they use this climate energy talk to control across the world. What is the one thing that we all have in common across the world is that everybody needs to have energy and food, right? And so they use that as a way to incite fear into children. If you read my book, They're Coming for Your Children, I talk about that. There's actually children who have committed suicide because of the fear that was put in them at school that there will not be enough resources, that the sky is falling, there's no energy. And yes, we see lots of things going on in the weather, but throughout history, we've seen that. When I was a child, they said, they called it global warming, and then things started getting cooler. And so then they just decided to change it to the word climate emergency because they couldn't actually spin it one way or the other because we always have changes in the earth. Things are going on. But God said, as long as there is the earth and it remains, there will be seed time harvest. You can travel all over the world and you'll see there's still more uninhabited land, more resources than there are people. And so this whole thing is a scam to push things. Now, I know JD did not address that there because it turns into this whole foolish argument. But let's just talk about solar panels and energy. He's absolutely right. The Inflation Reduction Act, for Tim Walz to brag about that took money out of your pocket, lots of tax dollars out of our pockets. They said it was for inflation reduction, but they lied to us. The Bible says God hates dishonest scales. They lied to us. They were not using that money at all to reduce inflation. If anything, inflation has gone through the roof since the Inflation Reduction Act. It was a way to launder money into using it for their Green New Deal because they cannot accomplish what they want to accomplish because solar panels are not efficient. We get 11-12% efficiency here in Ohio, and they're not efficient. And not only that, they change things. Our grid has to be changed in order to adapt and to take in that energy. So anywhere they put solar panels, prices go up on energy. And they're not green. What do you do with a solar panel at the end of its lifespan, 15 years, even though they tie up farmland and take farmland 40 years? They don't have any way to decommission these without it being dirty. They have telluride cadmium in them. We're trusting China to make solar panels that we're putting on our precious, most fertile farmland that have potential to catch on fire, that have potential to have hail damage, to leach into the soil, to create the fissures and cracks in those, to leach into our soil, and then them declare the soil is not any longer, will not produce crops. We have no test and no way to decommission these. Same thing with wind turbines. No way to decommission them. And birds and bird patterns and flight patterns. And when they put them out in the ocean, the whales, and the sharks, works. There's patterns in the earth, and they create heat. They create incredible amounts of heat that they draw to that ground. And there is yet to be seen whether you can grow anything in a place where a solar panel was. EVs, look at that mess, right? And so for them to talk energy, we were energy efficient, self-sufficient under Donald Trump. And let's look at the energy situation now. Our gas prices, our oil reserves are depleted, and we see now our farmland being taken and used for solar panels, which do not have a way to decommission, and neither do these wind turbines. All they can do is bury that fiberglass in the ground, and it never decomposes. So all of you young people especially who've been told, oh, green energy, clean energy. No, this is not clean energy. God put the gas under the ground. It is a clean form of energy, and coal can be clean as well. And so are all some of these other ways. Nuclear power plants, even though we've been, put fear about that, are actually far cleaner than some of these things they're selling us. This is a sales job by politicians who have invested in these solar panels, wind turbines, and EVs. And they're looking for their investment to pay off. And when anything gets in trouble, all they do is take more of your tax dollars and more money and funnel them into there. So, I haven't heard Tim Walz talk about his faith in the past, but just in case he wanted a little lesson in the Bible, this is a biblically based, looking at the issues. This is a biblical understanding of the issues that we face here in America. And so the Bible is clear. We're not in a climate emergency. We are in a moral emergency, and that's what we better talk about. And Tim, if you want to talk about the Bible, let's talk about protecting children from being aborted in the mother's womb. And even after the baby lives and survives an abortion, that you believe it's okay to leave that baby there to die after a botched abortion, and that you think it's fine for them to take children's bodies and give them chemical castration, drugs that were given to sex predators in the past, and give them surgeries that would actually mutilate and change their bodies at a very vulnerable age while they're going through puberty. Shame on you. That's not biblical. Let's take a look at some of the other issues that were brought about in the debate. One is gun violence. It's been a leftist talking point in the argument for disarming the American people, in spite of our amendments and in spite of our Constitution, which makes it clear that you and I have the right to bear arms. Tim Walz did such, I think, a poor job in the debate, arguing that he argued actually for gun ownership, and even said that whether it was a slip of the tongue or not, I'm friends with school shooters. Wow. He was trying to make a point to gun owners that, I've hunted and I've owned my own guns and gone pheasant hunting, and I was part of the NRA, and I've even been a friend with school shooters. Anyway, take a look.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, and here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that worked. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you out there, do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go? When we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills. They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms, and we can make a difference. We have to. If you're listening tonight, This breaks your heart.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting, and I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's doing okay. Christ have mercy. It is awful. And I appreciate what Tim said, actually, about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly, weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Okay, first of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse, or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools we've got to talk about more security.
I agree with J.D. Vance that the issue is not guns. Guns don't pull the trigger. It's people that do that. And whether it's a gun, a knife, or whatever, the issue is that we have a crisis in young people. And I believe that crisis is, first of all, spiritual. I believe we took God out of life. We took God out of family. The families broke apart in our nation, our divorce rate, all of the situations that we see going on. And then on top of that, our schools have been weaponized against the kids to train them and teach them that they were evolved from something, that abortion is acceptable, it's okay to kill children in the womb, that children are not really important. We see a total de-emphasis on the value, the human life that God created them. They have a purpose. They were created in His likeness and image. All of those things have been erased from their lives, and instead they're being told by their school teachers, by authorities they look up to, that they may not be a girl, they may not be a boy. They're being confused about their gender, their biology. My goodness, if they don't even know if they're a boy or a girl, and that's in question, everything's in question. And so to me, this is psychological warfare against children, which produces mental problems and mental health issues. Let's add to that fentanyl coming across our borders, legalizing marijuana, letting children chew gummies and eat things, no protection for kids. It's shocking. It's shocking what we are doing in America to our children. And then allowing TikTok, a Chinese company, to come into our country and to actually mess with our kids' minds, to tell them they should hate their country, hate their body, hate themselves, cut off their breasts, do this thing, this challenge, things that are dangerous to their health, get them to try to prove their identity while they actually mess with their whole security system and their identity. And so these are, to me, the real problem. Why are children taking their lives? Because they have no reason to live. They're hurting and they have no coping skills to know. They have the security that there's a God that loved them, that created them, and that they have a purpose and a destiny, and everything's going to be all right. We're not in this huge climate emergency, and their lives are going to be destroyed. Even I in school was told that by the time I was an adult, we would live in a 6 foot by 6 foot by 6 foot cell. I've never forgotten that, because it frightened me as a child for my school teacher that I'm looking up to tell me such things. And that was a lie. It was a climate lie that was told to me as a child. So when I see the horrific lies they are telling children, and that parents have stepped back and are not parenting their own children and are not protecting them from these lies, that is why we have a mental health problem in the United States with our children. And we have a mental health problem with many of the parents because of drug addictions, because of the things that they've gotten involved in for the same purposes of hopelessness. When you have hopelessness, people turn to drugs to anesthetize the pain. Pain seeks pleasure. We have a breakdown, and it is a spiritual problem, and that leads to morality issues. But our government has, in my opinion, aided and abetted this. They've allowed the fentanyl to come across the border, and I believe this administration has done the worst with this, because they wanted the wall down. They wanted to allow the border to be open. They've allowed sex trafficking. They've allowed the fentanyl to flow across our borders, and for 100,000 people to take their lives, and for addiction addictions, and they push for marijuana, and they push for things that, medical marijuana. I understand the argument there, but we don't have to dispense that to children on the street corners. We don't have to allow that. We must protect children, and any nation that doesn't protect its children is a nation in serious, serious moral degradation and sin, and we must repent. And we're praying for an awakening where people will turn back to God. Speaking of China, speaking of TikTok and fentanyl coming across our borders, it would be interesting to look at Tim Walz and his connection to China. This has been a bizarre thing in and of itself. And so in Democrat fashion, he floundered around the question about him lying about going to the Tiananmen Square and being there for the revolution. Let's see this lie.
Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400. Town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect, and I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything, many times I will talk a lot, I will get caught up in the rhetoric, but being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID, and I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you, Governor.
So it's kind of a, tricky situation here. I think he was caught in a lie, and he didn't want to own it. He said he was a knucklehead. He said that he was there earlier in the year, but the bigger question is, why was he there? Why was he such a proponent of China? And it was Nancy Pelosi and the Democrat Party that sang the praises of China, sang the praises of how they locked people down, refused to actually hold China accountable for the release of COVID and the fact that we had facilities there where they were doing gain-of-function research that we helped fund. All of those things were covered up by the Democrat Party. And so I don't see that this is a Republican issue as much. However, ever since the Clinton administration, we have seen us groomed, our kids, our sports organizations, even our golf, all these places, all of our American institutions have been taken over by China. China has come into there, and whether they've been completely taken over, they have been influenced. Money, big money, has influenced our higher learning. It's influenced our schools. It's influenced our children through social media. The influence has been there in the drug culture and the fentanyl. It's been in the influence of trying to make young people hate America, trying to destroy kids' lives. If you look at China, you'll not see the Chinese doing to their kids what they are trying to do to our children. And we need to wake up big time. And so I can't help but feel like Tim Walz was a part of that. Now let's talk about our good friend Dan Pilla, who actually lives in Tim Walz's state. He said when Tim Walz came into office, they had a surplus financially. Not only was their budget balanced, but they had a surplus. Since Tim Walz has been in there with his programs and all of the things that he's bragging about doing, they have a huge, huge deficit. And so let's talk about, he says, I want to do this for everybody. I want to give them this money and that money. Everywhere we look and we see cities that have had this leadership. And here I'm not talking about I'm pushing you to vote for this person or that person, but what I'm telling you is look at the platforms, look at their track record, look at the cities that are run by Democrats, look at the Republicans. No perfect people here, and definitely we have some people that are rhinos in the Republican Party who have not done the right thing either. But if you look by and large at the two platforms and the results, we see socialism leaning toward communism. Yeah, you can hold China up as a great country if you believe in communism and you want the outcomes that China has, where you harvest organs, you have human rights violations consistently. They target people. You can't get on a bus if you are have been excluded, if you have facial recognition. So there are lots of issues in China that Walz will not even talk about, and neither will most of his cohorts in the Democrat Party, and especially Nancy Pelosi. So that's my thoughts on that. I'd love to hear your thoughts today. What did you think? Now, I've surveyed some people, and I've had some people say, hey, J.D. Vance and Tim Walz were civil with each other. They were courteous. J.D. Vance especially went the extra mile, even when he heard about, Tim Walz's son seeing a shooting. Those types of things. I thought they were courteous to one another, and that was refreshing to see. I thought that there was times that Tim Walz seemed sincere, but then I had to remind myself also he's been a politician for a long time. And when I saw how he handled the lie about Tiananmen Square, when I saw how he played the gun thing, it made it clear to me he's just an excellent politician. And so J.D. Vance did a phenomenal job, I thought, for Donald Trump. And people are saying he won it, but he just won it by a margin. Others have said to me, well, I wish the two of them could be the president and the vice president. So anyway, I'd love to hear what you have to think and how you think CBS did in handling it. In the beginning, I personally thought they were being unfair to J.D. Vance, and I thought just the fact check, they did it with a gravitas, but I thought that they did also fact check JD, and they were slightly, it was a smoother way to maneuver, but there was definitely a favoritism toward Tim Walz. Give me your thoughts and tell me what you think. But what I want to remind you today is that Jesus is Lord. And so he's the one we must have at the center of our lives, at the center of our children's lives, our marriages, our homes, our nation, our families. And until we get back to the real true root of the problem, and that is we are in a spiritual warfare. This is a spiritual battle. It is between ideologies that closely align with a world governance, new world order, tyranny, which I put in the category of Satan. He's the original tyrant, and a battle for freedom that came from God, our rights, freedom of speech, freedom to worship God, freedom to raise up our children, freedom to own property and to produce something with our own hands. Those freedoms all come from God. They were not given to us by government. And I see where the socialism and the communism that I see the Democrat Party has moved so strongly in the last years toward, I see those as tyranny. And I see that our rights to freedom from God and our Constitution are more protected in the Republican Party. Tell me what you think. We'll see you next time. But until then, stay on guard. We'll see you then.